So did you get it? If you had checked our community tab over the last couple of days, there was a visual clue there. Photos of kind of a collage of several artists, bands. And that clue was going to tell you who our artist of this week was. The artist we're going to feature in this video, and then, of course, our next video. That would be Jimi Hendrix. Because all those artists in that picture collage were groups or artists whom Jimi Hendrix either backed up in a touring band or played on some sessions, all in his kind of early days before he blew up on his own and became Jimi Hendrix. So, and if you look in the picture, you see King Curtis in there, you see Little Richard and the Isley Brothers and many others. Well, all right. Enjoy Jimi Hendrix. Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. Had to get to Jimi Hendrix at some point, so let's do it. We've got two episodes, so I guess this is Hendrix week. This is the first of 2 episodes. So the way I'm going to divide this up, makes sense to me, is this episode will kind of do the introductions, talk about Hendrix in general, why he's so significant, and I want to talk about his discography that he put out, or that was put out during his lifetime, which is actually fairly short. 3 studio records, a live record of new material, so that really kind of acts as a 4th record, and 1 comp, one record that has partially him but not totally him live, and that's about it. Now his posthumous discography is really complicated. It's like a labyrinth, and that will be episode 2, where we'll kind of unravel the story of what has happened to his music after he died, because there was a lot of stuff that he had recorded by the time of his death that hadn't come out, and so there's this really complex story of competing releases and legal entanglements and all kinds of interesting stuff. But we're going to save that story for the second episode. This particular episode is just going to be a lot more straightforward, what was put out during his lifetime. So, in my opinion, I mean, the 2 most important rock guitarists there ever were would be Chuck Berry and Jimi Hendrix. And were there people that maybe had more speed or more technique, or sure, but as most significant, most impactful, I think is Chuck Berry and Jimi Hendrix. So what do we focus on with Jimi Hendrix? We focus on his guitar playing, obviously. He pioneered sort of the simultaneous playing, rhythmic playing and lead kind of at the same time. I mean, just stunning how he was able to do that. Chord techniques that were far more advanced than anyone in rock had done before, kind of using all these triads for things. And its pioneering use of effects. I mean, pedals and distortion and fuzz and all of that to, the whole guitar, so to speak. And what's fascinating is people still can't totally mimic what he was doing. Still can't figure out exactly what he was doing to those amps and all of that. And he's a left-handed player too, which is sort of interesting. It's add another little twist there, how it makes him a little harder to imitate. But I'm going to argue this: his importance go beyond just the obvious guitar playing. What often gets overlooked, in my view, is as a songwriter. He was phenomenal as a songwriter. I mean, totally untrained. I don't think he ever really read music or anything like that. And so it was all just sort of instinct and learned from experience. And his songwriting, I mean, take a look at those hits, like off that first record, that debut record. I mean, tight, concise. Yeah, there's kind of some longer experimental stuff, but a lot of those songs are, tight 3 minute songs. And just those songs, just as songs, forget the guitar playing and all that, are so well constructed, so catchy. The hooks and the melodies, and I think his greatness as a guitar player sometimes overshadows his greatness as a songwriter. One other thing that I think is overshadowed is his greatness as a singer. Jimmy was a fantastic singer, very expressive. He could, he could do a variety, very gentle, beautiful kind of balladry, or psychedelic experimentation, and or just rock out, or just playing straight blues. So not only playing that, but singing all of that stuff. Very expressive, unique voice, very confident voice. They could kind of slide in and out, and it's just, God, so not only is a guitar player, a songwriter, a singer, all of that stuff. And his primary band, or at least, the band he started out with, The Experience, with Noel Redding on bass, which is interesting because Noel Redding had been a guitar player, but he was brought in on bass, and Mitch Mitchell on drums. Two white Englishmen, which is interesting, right? That were kind of brought together to play with Jimmy. And yeah, I mean, just an incredible band. And the three studio records are, with that lineup, although that third record has a lot of other people kind of coming in and doing stuff too. Noel Redding kind of wants to go off and do his own thing. Jimmy, well, Band of Gypsys, that one live record, he brings in Billy Cox, an army buddy of his, on bass, who's not as flashy as Noel Redding, but kind of a lot deeper with the groove, and kind of rootsier, which matched the direction Jimmy was, I think, going in at the time of his demise. Uh, and Buddy Miles, of course, on drums and taking some vocals too. And that was just sort of a one-off thing. And Buddy Miles, went off and did other things after that. And really, by the time Jimi Hendrix was, you know, died, he was sort of settling into, I think, kind of a, experience Mach 2, with Billy Cox on bass, and then bringing Mitch Mitchell back in on drums, and that seemed to be sort of the coalescing of the new group here. When he passed. So, a little bit of background and analysis, but let's get to these records. I'm gonna do it a little bit differently because we only got three studio records and a live record. I'm gonna just kind of talk chronologically this time around. Then, if you want, at the very end, I'll rank them, tell you what I think is best, and all that. But you start with, yeah, and I need to do a video on ranking great debut albums. But this is one of the greatest debut records ever. And Hendrix obviously an American, but really kind of got his start more in England. He went over to England, and Chaz Chandler from the Animals sort of became his manager, and sort of put things together for him. And he really broke in England first, and then had to come back. It's almost like he was part of this later British invasion, even though he was an American. And so, with his debut album, as many of you probably know, you have two versions of it. You have the British, the English version, which is this one. So, Are You Experienced, 1967, right? His debut. And then the American version, which has this artwork. And there are 3 tracks on here that are not on here, and 3 tracks that are on here that are not on here. Okay. And there were also several B-sides from the singles that weren't on either one. So in this case, it really is advisable to get the CD version, because the CD version has all the tracks. Everything that overlapped on both, everything that was exclusively American or exclusively English, and the B-sides. So 17 tracks in total. I honestly consider this to be, the definitive album in some ways, the CD version with all 17 tracks, because I mean, they were all recorded, in the same sessions, so they really do belong together. And so yeah, that's one case where the CD is good to get, but it's cool to have both versions of the vinyl. And even though it's only 3 songs being traded off and whatnot, it really does create sort of unique feeling for each of these records. I think the UK version is a little sort of more down to earth, a little bluesier, because of course you have Red House, which is the straight blues song that's on here that's not on here. Remember, which was kind of very R&B and kind of soul, and so yeah, kind of a little more influenced by that. This is more psychedelic. You can tell from the album art, right? Purple Haze is on here, not on here. What's one of the other ones? Hey Joe, which is not on here, is on here. And I mean, part of that is at the even into the late '60s, the habit of on English records, singles were seen as sort of their own distinct entity, and so to give you value for your money, they wouldn't put stuff out as singles and then also repeat on the records in a lot of cases. Whereas in the American in the American record industry, you threw the singles on the records. So I mean, get people to pay for it twice, right? And so that's one of the reasons. I'm not just with Hendrix, but Beatles and all, some of the early Stones records. You have sort of unique UK versus American releases anyway. Whichever version or the CD version, which has everything, it's all brilliant. I mean, again, you've got. I'll just. If I got to pick one or the other of these, I think I slightly prefer the American version. I think it's a little more, like I said, a little more experimental, a little more exciting. But man, so I'll go with that. But I mean, opening with Purple Haze, of course. I mean, just this reads almost like a greatest hits, and just as a debut album. I mean, look at this side one: Purple Haze, Manic Depression, Hey Joe, Lover Confusion, May This Be Love, I Don't Live Today. Side two: The Wind Cries Mary, Fire, Third Stone from the Sun, Foxy Lady, Are You Experienced? I mean, every one of those songs is, at least to people that are really into classic rock, is pretty familiar. And to realize that that's it's not a comp. It's just his debut album. And for there they are there for a guy to come out of the gate like that, writing these type of songs. I mean, everything from like tight, kind of rock pop songs, pop kind of rock songs like Fire, uh, Manic Depression, Purple Haze, to stretching out with way more experimental stuff like Third Stone from the Sun, which I love. Are You Experienced? And it's all here. Man, it's just brilliant. I mean, this is obviously in the conversation for greatest debut album in rock and roll history, right? Then it was after his, and if you go back, if you watched our Woodstock versus Monterey video we did fairly recently, I talk about Hendrix's performances at both, but of course his performance at Monterey, the Monterey Pop Festival, in 1967, was really kind of his breakout moment in the U.S. Now later, 1970, although still I believe, no, I honestly I don't know if this was like right after he died or before he died, but they put out this very strange record here, which side one is like 4 tracks from Hendrix's Monterey Pop set, and then the other side is Otis Redding's set. And even though they didn't, I mean, other than just being amazing, groundbreaking, African American artists, um, they didn't play together or anything. They didn't like jump in on each other's sets or anything like that. It's just like it's just sort of like it's just kind of random. Let's slap these 2 sets together on a record. All right, and then later, of course, after he died, later his entire Monterey Pop set was released on record. Here, so the whole set. His second record, also released in 1967, Axis Bold as Love. Now, he apparently really hated this album art. To me, it's whatever, but no, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, Axis Bold as Love, where, I mean, also brilliant, where Hendrix kind of stretches out a little bit, on his songwriting. And you know, I mean, you have, of course, the gorgeous Little Wing. You have Castles Made of Sand, which is just, I mean, one of the most gorgeous songs ever. And lyrically, again, the songwriting is great. And so this is kind of more the same, sort of still, in that vein of the debut. But then his third record, and I've talked about these when I do the yearly countdowns and all that kind of stuff. I think his masterpiece, Electric Ladyland, double album, just really stretches out and does so much, bringing in some interesting guests. You have Steve Winwood plays on some stuff, Dave Mason plays on some stuff, Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones. Um, Buddy Miles is on there, Jack Cassidy from Jefferson Airplane, Chris Wood from Traffic. So you have some interesting people in addition to the experience. It's kind of interesting if you read all about the recording of this. I mean, it was chaotic. There's a lot of hangers on in the studio. It seemed chaotic at the time, but it's incredible that this thing came out as it did. I mean, double album, sprawling. I mean, Jimi, blues, psychedelia, pop, progressive rock, almost. With 1983, right? Was it? Yeah, 1983. A merman I should turn to be. Uh, Hard rock, soul. I mean, blues. All of it's here. It's just this is. It's astounding how good this is. I mean, really. Just highlights for me. I mean, Crosstown Traffic. This is a great radio song, radio hit, pop song almost. You got Voodoo Child, like 15-minute, just blazing blues. Burning of the Midnight Lamp, with that wah pedal and some of that psychedelia. 1983, I really like. I'm almost the full side, almost progressive rock and really experimental. And side 4, I need to do a video on this stuff too, but side 4 is one of the greatest sides ever. I mean, opening with, so on side 3 opened with Rainy Day, Dream Away, and it kind of fades out. And then side 4 opens with sort of fading in there with this sort of the second part of that, which just grooves. You got this soul groove, Still Raining, Still Dreaming. Then House Burning Down is one of his most overtly political songs. It's powerful stuff. And All Along the Watchtower, of course, his cover of the Bob Dylan song, where he completely remakes that song. I will say this here. I think that is the greatest cover song ever. If you listen to the original Bob Dylan tune, on John Wesley Harding, I should have pulled it off. But John Wesley Harding, it's a slower, kind of acoustic, folkish song. Hendrix turns this into a brilliantly constructed rock song with layers of guitars, these cascading guitar lines, just totally remakes that song, and kind of fun fact, Dave Mason plays some 12-string on there, and Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones plays some percussion on there. And I mean, just look at how many people have covered that song, and it's always like hit when when people do All Along the Watchtower, it's always Jimi Hendrix's arrangement. And I guess the ultimate compliment is Bob Dylan himself when he plays that song. It's usually Hendrix's arrangement. I mean, I mean, it's just incredible, this whole record. And then, of course, closing that side with Voodoo Child, Slight Return, which I think is some of the most amazing use of the wah pedal and these effects, and it's just, God, it's just otherworldly. That side 4, man, is a perfect side. Really a perfect record, a perfect double album is Electric Ladyland. Now, he only put out one compilation in his lifetime. There's a billion comps after his life. after he died, but only one during his lifetime. It was smash hits. This is an interesting record. I think this record is very useful in really emphasizing what a great songwriter he was, because you don't have any like really long experimental stuff. These are all like real tight, the tight, 3 minute, 3.5 minute songs, and it really emphasizes just what an amazing songwriter, like rock songwriter he was. Now there's, All Along Watchtower is on there, and Hey Joe is on there, so some covers, but again, also demonstrates how he could completely remake and revolutionize, the approach to cover songs too. And so, just as an arranger slash songwriter, I mean, this is a great showcase for that, I think. So the experience kind of break apart. Hendrix is really sort of trying to find his way. He's playing with just a lot of different people. Uh, he has a contract obligation, and so he owes one more record. And so he put together Band of Gypsies, and this was kind of intended as a one-off, kind of as a transitional thing. Turns out to be his last record that he put out in his lifetime. So it's taken on more, I think, importance than maybe he even intended. But it's where he really wanted to kind of get into some more of the funk and soul and kind of sort of R&B kind of black music, right? And so Mitch Mitchell is gone, although he'll come back, and Noel Redding is gone, and he puts together, it's an all black trio. It's Hendrix, it's Buddy Miles on drums, and also sharing some vocals, and Billy Cox on bass, and puts out this Band of Gypsies, which is a live record, but of all new songs. Okay, so it kind of serves the purpose as another record, showcasing new material. Now, I know the Buddy Miles song changes and all that's on here is pretty cool. This is good, but there is one track on here that makes this absolutely essential. And if you're going to pick one song that maybe is sort of the pinnacle as a guitar player, as an expressive guitar player, I think it might be Machine Gun on here, all 12 and a half minutes of it. Just, it's kind of the slow burn, but intense. And Hendrix's guitar play, it just takes flight, and it's just remarkable, remarkable song. But yeah, there you go, and that ends, looking at everything that was released during his lifetime. So real quick, if we want to rank them, we can rank them. Let me grab them. I will include Band of Gypsy, since it is, even if it's a live album, it's all like new material. So let's say he put out 4 records during his life, and we'll rank them here. I'll use the American Are You Experienced, for this ranking. So pretty easy here. Let me put them in order. I would go Band of Gypsies at number 4, but essential for Machine Gun, definitely. I would go the second one, Axis Bold as Love, as the number 3 slot. I know this has, it's still brilliant, but I don't think it's as brilliant as the other two. And but there are people who would put this in their number 1 slot. I'm positive. Now 1 and 2, it's hard. They are both, just 2 of the greatest records ever released in music, in rock and roll music. But you're gonna make me pick the ever so slightest. This is really 1A and 1B, but ever so slightest in the 2 slot. I would put the debut Are You Experienced. But again, just consider like all the songs from those sessions, just incredible, amount of creativity, and just changed the rock and roll landscape, changed guitar playing, but everything else. And so, yeah, I think this is one of the greatest records ever made, period. Electric Ladyland in my number 1 slot if we're ranking these. All right. Well, all right, guys. So that is Jimi Hendrix Part 1. And I honestly, I'm really excited about the next episode because it's such an interesting story. Um, there were only 3 studio records to deal with in this particular episode. We're looking at 13 studio records of posthumous releases, and all kinds of interesting legal fights and scuffles and questionable choices made on some of these records, and it's a fascinating story. So stay tuned. Next episode, we'll talk about posthumous Jimi Hendrix releases and wrap up Hendrix Week. All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. Please do subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And like the videos, hit the bell for notifications, all that great stuff. And we'll see you. We'll see you next time to wrap up Hendrix Week.